Hey guys, here we are. Yes, it's time to paint Dueling Dragons, Dance of Death, whatever you want to call it. I'm Ann Forrester with Reaper Miniatures, and it is time for Reaper ToolBox Live, where we will launch into Wings today on Julie Guthrie's awesome Dueling Dragons diorama. Say that 5 times fast. Dance of Death. There we go. That was feisty. Hey guys. Oh, I'm still on camera. But the dragon's supposed to be on camera. Anyway, so I promised you guys today that we would do some veins on some wing membranes. And I also realized that wings are indeed my least favorite thing to paint. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to do all the insides of these 2 wings fast. We're going to do it super fast. We're going to try to get them all to a somewhat state of doneness today. Not necessarily the black scales in between, but at least the light colored membranes. And the reason we are using the lighter blue-gray color is because, if you recall, we went with that color. Hey, Justin, can you give me minicam? Minicam. All right. With his belly. So, okay. Hi, Ren. Bird with a brush. And I wanted to say also, Swillow. Yeah, Dallas Fuel, Burn Blue, Overwatch League for the win. You totally get brownie points from me. All right, and hi Max Fars, and hi Cajun Mage, and Moobot is very informative, and Jedi Jared, nice to meet you. And Lady Dar Doggo, are you new? I approve of anybody who is Doggo. That is awesome. All right, so yes, our goal today is to quickly put some highlights on the interior membranes of these wings, and then do some veins etched in over the surface, and do a glaze over the top of that to kind of blend everything in and make those veins look real. That is our goal. We shall see if we manage it. Oh, mini painting. Yes, Samus, we're here to mini paint. Hi, Grim. Good to see you. All right. Yes, that's what we do on this show, Samus. We paint dragons, apparently. I don't always paint dragons, but when I do, I paint Julie Guthrie's Dance of Death on Reaper ToolBox Live. So here we are. So I'm starting out with a mixture of, I would say, I should have really figured out a ratio here, but I like this blue-gray. It's actually a mix of dragon white, which is Bones White, is 9439, and blue liner, which is MSP Core 9066. These guys right there. So blue liner is almost a blue-black. It's very close to black. I really like the color it goes when you mix white into it. So you paint as well. Poorly. Well, yeah, it's all right. It's all right if you paint poorly. There is always room for improvement, and you get better with every mini. Trust us. But yeah, I really like the color that blue liner makes when you add white to it. I think this is about a 1/3 blue liner, 2/3 white mixture, something around that. So that is what we will start with. And I'm going to be doing a lot of wet blending today because we're doing speed. And when I do speed, wet blending is what I usually reach for. Also, it is, it's just a nice fast technique to set things up. So one thing I do kind of want to look at, though, as I mix up my white, because I need 2 colors for wet blending. I need my shadow and my highlight. My highlight here is going to be pretty much pure white. And my shadow is going to be this blue-gray that I started with. So these are going to be pretty pale wing membranes, but that's because, you know, if you think about the undersides of lizards, they often are paler. So we're going to go with that. Julie, yes, Grim. Julie sculpted those D&D dragons for Grenadier. She sculpted so much stuff for the old Grenadier and Ralpartha line. And she loves to see that stuff. Like if you bring it to ReaperCon and ask her if she sculpted it, she might have to look at it, but sometimes she'd be like, oh yeah, that one, I remember doing that one. It's pretty awesome. All right, so I just base coated the interior of these. What I do want to do is kind of set up these wings on my dragon to see kind of what pose he's going to be in. Because I want to paint the wings appropriately for where the light is falling. And my light is a little wonky in here because I've got some different directional lights going on. No, wings! So, okay, that is a problem. So, the reason the wings are falling out, by the way, is because I shaved them down so they would fit on the dragon better. And this is actually something that was brought up to me by, I think, Collins or somebody. I don't remember who brought it up. One of the staff wanted me to talk about getting these to fit on better. Because sometimes with bones, and with metal for that matter, when you try to fit parts together, they don't always go great, right? So with the bone stuff, often what I find is that these vent parts, these big long stick into the dragon parts, are a little bit too long. So what I ended up doing is I ended up carving out this cutaway a little bit so that it went a little bit deeper. And I ended up trimming down just with the side cutters, really, with the flush cutters, just chopping off some of these tabs. And there's still enough there so that when I fit it together, it'll glue just fine. It's got enough to fit together, but it doesn't always hold the wings like perfectly in place. So I do have to kind of watch that. So unfortunately, I don't have a great overhead light. Usually I want an overhead light source to kind of show me. So I might need to go like that to kind of show me where the light is coming from. Because Dragon actually is fighting like this. Like he's up on his tail and his head is pointed up and he's about to like breathe acid or fire or whatever at his buddy that he's fighting with. Obviously they're just having a general roommate argument or something. But whatever the case, whether Dragon number 1 didn't put the toilet seat down or what, they are fighting, and this is the pose that he is roughly in. So I kind of have to look at where does the light fall. And what I'm really seeing here is that most of the wings down here are going to be in shadow. Maybe I'm just going to deal with like some reflected light. So like just a little bit of lightning here or there. And if I put my hand down underneath, I can kind of see how the light would reflect up onto the wing. So maybe I'll play with that. And there's a little bit of natural light hitting here. So I think I know where I want to highlight roughly. And this wing is going to be a lot in shadow. I'm probably, when I've got a wing that's all in shadow, but I want to highlight it anyway, then I'm really just going, well, I might just want to highlight it so it looks good at that point, right? What do we got? Oh, am I off? Dragon. Tape is off center. There we go. Yay! Now we're better.
Yes, we are. Of course.
The camera was traveling. The camera was like, I'm a little bored. I'm going to go over here. Hope you guys don't mind.
I set your line up a little closer, too. I set your line up a little closer.
Oh, thanks. And Justin has fixed our lights, so there we go. Okay, so yeah, I mean, the wings are mostly in shadow. I can see a bit of highlight kind of here, back here on where these flare out, so I guess we'll put highlights there. Maybe I'm just going to end up highlighting toward the edges. I mean, that could just be my call. If you can't actually mimic natural lighting very well because something's going to be in shadow, you can always choose the stylistic road and just decide on what will look good. So let's do that. Let's highlight toward the edges of the wing because if light is shining through the wings, if they are that thin, and they probably would be in order to show veins, then the edges are going to be a little bit thinner where they're stretched. So it's okay to make things a little bit lighter just toward the edges. Let's do that. Let's see here. You have not missed much, Kurniko. It's just me rambling on about dragons and putting them together. That dragon might need a bone transfusion. Oh, Samus, that's bad. I can't give you bonus like points or prizes for bad puns because that would just encourage everyone, and that would be terrible. We'd end up giving away half the company by the end of one Twitch stream. But I appreciated that. So I'm going to thin my paint just a little bit. Oh, yeah, we've got more Drow Nipple Pink this week, guys. That awesome purpley color. Hey, and it actually, that pretty much is what it looks like. It's a great skin tone shading color for those who have not encountered the legendary Drow Nipple Pink. This is a joke color. Yay! Yes, having that tape there does help keep the dragon in focus. I love it. It reminds me where to keep my hand. It also gives me a good place to rest my hand, which is very nice. So we're going to wet blend this wing, and I'm going to add just a tiny bit of water to my dragon white. Just to keep it from drying out too fast while I'm working with it more than anything. With wet blending, you want to keep your paint pretty opaque, so you don't want to thin it. Or if you do thin it, you don't want to thin it much. If you use a wet palette, you do not need to thin it at all. Not punished, just not encouraged, Samus. Yay, Grim subscribed! Awesome. Oh, that's actually a good reminder. If you really like Reaper Toolbox Live, definitely subscribe on Twitch to us, and that way you'll get notified when we go live. And the other cool thing is, for those of you who don't know, if you are a Amazon Prime member, you actually get a free Prime sub on Twitch, because they're partners. So you can go to Twitch and look up Reaper Toolbox Live, or Reaper Miniatures is the channel we're are we Reaper Miniatures? Remind me.
Reaper Miniatures.
Okay, Reaper Miniatures is the channel we are on. And then you can go up to subscribe, and it should give you an option to sub with your Twitch Prime for free, which is awesome. Because then you can support the people you like on Twitch, and you don't have to pay anything extra. you're getting extra value. So lay down your first color for your wet blend, grab just a little bit on your brush. Use a large brush for wet blending. You want to use a brush that is big enough to quickly interact with the surface that you are working with. And when you get too much white, you're just going to grab some of your base color and you're going to grab more white and you're going to work that in toward the edge. And we are just going to keep going back and forth. And sometimes with blues, it can be a little hard because when you first put the blue down, it looks lighter and then it darkens as it dries. This is just a feature that we tend to notice with blues, probably because of the phthalocyanine pigment. It just tends to work that way. See, that's definitely too light. So wet blending is just this thing where you just kind of go at it and you keep going at it. And I might need to rinse out my brush and pop a little bit more of the pure color on here. All right, there we go. Much better.
Miss Ann?
Yes.
AJ Payne actually has a question there.
Oh, yeah.
That it's kind of an in-depth question.
Between the liner paints, clear paints, and regular paints. Oh, yay. Okay, so liner paints, clear paints, and regular paints. Clears, like our friend Clear Red. Very, very bright colors with a lot of pigment in them, and almost all of them are single pigments. So it's like just red pigment in just a red base. So they're really good they're really bright. They're good for glow effects. They're good for mixing, and they're good for intensifying other colors if you want to, like if you have a red and you like it, but it's not quite as bright as you'd like, you could actually put a glaze of the clear red over the top and it'll brighten it up. So clears are like that. They're very, very useful for mixing colors when you want to know exactly what is in your mix. The liners, which I'm using blue liner, obviously, as one component of this paint job, blue liner mixed with white. As you can see, you can use liners just like regular paint, as I am doing. But you can also use them as liners, which are meant to essentially do the dark lines when... do I have something? I do not have a mini right now, but normally when you paint a miniature, especially a 28mm miniature, it helps if you put dark shadows in between various surfaces. So like in between the hand and the sleeve, or in between a sleeve and a vest. Wherever you change surfaces, you usually want a dark shadow because it makes all your details stand out more on 28mm, where you really need some help with that. And so we made the liners because they're naturally good at that. They're a little bit more of a fluid paint rather than a thicker goopy paint. And so they naturally flow a little bit better for those thin lines. And you can thin them. As you thin them, they go a little bit translucent. So that way you can control the harshness of the line that you're putting down. So if you wanted a really cartoony effect, you might go with liner straight up or only thinned a tiny bit, just enough to get it off the brush. But if you wanted a more naturalistic effect, like I do on, say, historical models when I paint those, then I often thin my brown liner way down so that it's more of a natural shadow than a harsh line. And that is a useful thing to do for a more naturalistic effect. I might need a bigger brush. Well, no, this is working, actually. It's not bad. So wet blending doesn't give you a perfect blend out the gate, but it gives you something that you can work with. And it is fast. So let me see here. Have flow improver in the liners, Grim? Yes, we do have extra flow improver in the liners. All of the Reaper Master Series paints actually have flow improver added right into them, so you don't have to. Ferrician, I see that you got one of my porcelain palettes, and that's awesome. So cool. Here, let me show you guys my palette. So I'm one of the few endangered species painters that uses a porcelain palette instead of a wet palette these days. Let's see here. Trying to get it in camera. I don't know where to go. That way. Ta-da! Okay. So this is a porcelain palette, but as you can see, it's got lots of tiny, tiny, tiny little wells. And this is really useful for painting miniatures because you can use I usually use about 8 drops of paint in one of these and then a bit of water. And because you have a tiny well, it's not exposing much surface tension, which means the paint stays wet at the consistency you need it for longer. And if you say, well, why not just use a wet palette? Well, the problem with wet palettes is they're great if you're painting, actually for wet blending like this, they're just fine. But when you try to make really thin paints for layering, then you want your paint to stay at a precise consistency because you're really trying to get it to that perfect state where you're halfway between, you want it transparent, right? But you don't want it too transparent and you don't want it too thick and you want it at a sweet spot. But the problem with your wet palette is when you thin paint down to that range, the wet palette's going to go, oh, there's too much water, slurp. and it's going to pull that water right down to the sponge. So it's really hard to get smooth layering with a wet palette. And most of what I do is actually layering. So that's why I gravitate toward the well palette. But I put a little bit of water in these at the start of the show, and I'm not going to add water to them for quite a while. So they're still pretty thick, so they'll start to skin over sooner. When I do these to a layering consistency, which is really thin and watery, I don't have to touch them for 2 hours. I mean, they'll be just about perfect. And you like porcelain palettes over plastic, by the way, guys, because they're so easy to clean. Just throw it in the sink with some hot water, spritz some Simple Green or 409 on it, let it soak for like 5 minutes, and it'll all come off, especially if you have a green scrubby, the legendary green scrubbies. All right, so let's continue. The problem with working white without thinned white is just that it's very strong. You can see how heavy this white pigment is when I just bring it into here. So I have to grab a little bit more of my blue-gray and fudge that line in, see? And again, it's not going to give me a perfect blend, but it's going to give me a start. And then once I essentially put veins in and do a glaze, it should cover it right up. So at this point, I'm like, well, this is great, Am, but we really need it to be bigger. I think I might switch to a bigger brush. When you wet blend, it's usually a lot easier for you if you choose something huge. Now, I was already using a number 2, so you guys will all be horrified. This is my gigantic. This is the biggest brush I currently have on my tray. It's a synthetic. It is a gigantic flat. I think it's a size 10. Yeah, it's for canvas painting. But when you're on wings, you just do what you have to. All right. Oh, yeah, and those palettes are also fairly cheap. Yeah, with shipping, it's going to be $16, but the palette itself is only around like $9 or $10, I think. And it is quite heavy. So, all right, let's see here. Let us try this again, only with feeling or with giant brush. So I'm going to wipe out what I already did, and I'm going to try to wet blend with giant brush instead, just to show you guys. Rawr, giant brush goes. I can cover all this territory. Another thing is you want a lot of paint on the model when you're wet blending. And the reason for this is that it will dry slower if you have a lot of model or a lot of paint on the model. Now look how much easier this is. I can cover so much more room. I can bring my highlight up into the wing a lot more. I can grab a little bit more white, and I can go up halfway, and everything is still wet because I'm able to work faster because I have a bigger brush. So let this be a lesson to you. If you are wet blending, use a large brush. You can't use something that's like half as, like over here, this might be too big. But you want something that's, going to cover territory quickly so that you aren't kind of nitpicking on one small area. When you're working wet blending with like skin tones, it's a lot easier because you can just work on each like muscle mass. Like if you're working on an ogre, you can just work on his biceps, then you can work on the triceps, you can work on all the different muscles separately, right? You can break it up. If you're working on a cape, you can do it fold by fold. But with a wing like this, it's really all or nothing, so you kind of have to whip out the gigantic canvas brush and just kind of go to town. I'm going to try to go a little bit paler. And the faster I work, the minute this starts to dry, I have to stop because I'm going to start screwing it up. Because the minute the paint starts to dry, if you put any new brush strokes over the top, you're going to skin up what you already did. That's the other challenge with working on something this large with wet blending. But layering would take me so long. So it's like, well, let's give it a try. And now, Dragonite, about Bones 5. Do we have a date? The previous date was the 5th of September. I do not know if that is still the date. I know that there was discussion about it, and that was our tentative start date. Nothing has changed that I know of. But if you want to know for sure, you probably want to tune in to Reaper Live tomorrow, where Ed and Ron, two of our owners, essentially break down everything you need to know about Reaper. They will be able to answer that question far more definitively than me, since I'm not directly involved with Kickstarter. I make the paint for the Kickstarter, but so I'm there on a micro level, but not a macro level there. All right, so that's actually starting to come up decently. I might want to really lighten up that edge. Looks a little bit more dramatic in person.
Samus had a question there.
Up. Where are we?
How does wet blending work on smaller miniatures?
Okay, so wet blending with smaller minis. you want to do wet blending on the largest areas of smaller minis. So like I would not wet blend a face on a 28mm model, but I would wet blend a cloak or a pair of pants or anything where I could, you know, really get into a bigger area. So it's very, I would say it's useful for the larger areas. And on anything, yeah, any monsters, it tends to be very, very good. Actually, it's really good for stuff like fur. See, now I'm starting to get close, dangerously close to drying. You see, I'm starting to get texture in there. That means you're starting to get close to drying. It means you have to wrap it up quickly or re-wet the surface quickly. And I'm gonna just hit this a little bit more, and we're gonna see how that works. I don't mind a little texture because I'm probably gonna be able to hide it, but that at least gives me a little bit. Yeah, see, that's not a bad look at all. So that's good. Not bad. Yeah, happy wolves. Exactly. Exactly. Wolves and other things that are furry or pelts on people's shoulders or fur capes are fantastic to use wet blending on because it can give you that overall gradient you're looking for, and then you go in and you just kind of highlight the individual like clumps of fur or whatever. I like to do wolves that way because I'll start with a dark gray and a light tan and I'll wet blend them together, and that gives you a really good naturalistic wolf look. Then you take your light tan and a creamy white, like creamy ivory, 9144 is my favorite, and do an additional wet blend for that additional, like the legs. It works really, really well. All right, so this is a smaller wing, and my big brush is probably going to be too much for it. I might try it anyway because it'll let me cover ground really fast. So let's experiment and see if giant brush is too much for this. And see if we can get this membrane looking as good as the other one does. So I mostly just want to cover this area because I just kind of want this, I want this interior surface toward the edge to go lighter. So pick up a little bit of white. I might just move this palette down so you guys can see. There we go. All right, so picking up just a tiny, tiny bit. Like, you see that? Just the corner of my brush. And I'm dabbing it off a little bit too because I don't want it too strong when I go in. So kind of do that. Grab a little bit more of this, just as I know that seeing me load my brush is very instructive sometimes for people. So I'm going to try to do that. And again, I want a little bit of white. And you can see also I'm going back and forth. I'm going to concentrate my white more toward the center of the wing. Kind of try to smooth it out as it moves up. Grab a little bit more of my blue to try to blend that in a little bit. Got a little bit of white going a little bit high there. We'll see how that works. Grab a little bit more white, dab, dab, dab. Got to dab, dab, dab. That's it. This is another nice thing about using kind of a craptastic brush for this, by the way, because wet blending does not require a fantastically awesome brush. Obviously, because I'm not using one. So you can just kind of, you know, smack your brush around and just kind of work with it. There we go. Ah, no, I got some stuff on. I blurfed. See that blurf? Yeah, I'm going to have to fix that. That's all right, though. We're working on it. Yeah, it's going a bit high. I'm going to switch to my shorter brush, my 2, grab some of my original blue, and I'm going to tackle it up here. And I don't really care if I get over the black here. I can touch that up so easily. Our black is a really high coverage black, so if we get a little bit all on the black, we can touch it up very easily. That's why I would not paint these areas first, by the way. I would do the big messy areas first and then go in with the micro detail areas. That way you don't, you know, do awesome detail on these scales and then blorf and get, you know, blue-white paint all over it and go, ah, and, you know, throw your brush against the wall and things like that. We do not like to see brush abuse. We like to see happy painting. Your painting hobby should be relaxing, not stressful. Let's see here. So now my paint is still wet, so I'm still good. I'm going to try to just blend a little bit in here and keep working up to get it blended in fully. So that's good. Yeah, there we go. And see, I'm getting a bit of brush texture here because I was using a big old fat brush and smooshing it around. But that's not bad. It gives the wing a little bit of texture. And since the wing is skin, that's not a bad thing at all. So this actually is not a bad thing to do. Now, one thing you'll notice about wet blending is that you never get the really pure white, and you never really end up with a lot of that initial darker blue. Most of your wing is going to be somewhere in between. And it can be a downside or a plus side to wet blending because you never get the dramatic parts. So what you do is if you lose all your dark shadow or you don't get quite up to pure white, but you want those colors, is you come in after you wet blend with layering, and that's where you add those touches in. Like if I want a bit more detail here where the wing is kind of creasing and folding, then I can use layering and come in and pick out each of those little sections and make them, you know, even a little bit more accentuated than they are here. So let's do other wing here. So I think starting out with big brush actually worked pretty well, and then switching to small brush. So we're going to do that. We're going to continue to do that and see how it works. I'm getting a little low on my blue-gray though. I might have to remix it. So I do have to finish this wing before I run out. It is okay if the wings, if the separate wings are not quite the same blue-gray. It is okay. But we do not want this different panels on the same wing to not match. That would be kind of silly. Now, given my blue-gray is mixed entirely with just blue liner and white, and the advantage when you're mixing colors to keeping only 2 colors is exactly that. You can get a really close match again, no problem, with minimal effort, because you know you only use those 2 colors, and so nothing you do is going to be too far off. If you try to wet blend or you try to blend or mix more than 2 colors, that's when you can really get into trouble with trying to match your colors later. Even if you kind of keep a note on ratios, you can get a little bit too over the top. If you're really good at color, then you can try it. But definitely keep a note on the ratios you use. And the problem comes in because you may not know all of the pigments being used in those colors. That's why people say to use single pigment paints like the clears, or at most dual pigment paints if you're going to be doing a lot of mixing. Because if you just grab a red off the rack, that red could have blue, violet, red oxide, black. It could have all sorts of stuff in it that makes it that pretty darker red. And if you don't know what's in it and you try to mix stuff with it and then you add in a third color, that can get crazy right away. You're going to be like, wait, where's this gray tone coming from, you know? And you wouldn't know because you didn't know what was in the paint. So always kind of try to, if you're going to mix, try to mix very simply. Keep track of what you use. I'm getting some texture on there. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. Troxul has folds or veins sculpted into the wing. Should it be heavily shaded and highlighted or keep it more consistent? Graham, I think I'd keep it more consistent. Just because with him, he really seems to have big, heavy wings, T-Rock does. So for me, I think it's more like these kind of folds here where they would pick up the light naturally and not necessarily stand out immensely. I mean, veins are rough, right? Because they're, technically that fold could be darker if it has a vein under it or, you know, something like that because you've got a vessel under there. So that's a really hard call there. I would probably just default to shading it and highlighting it like the rest of the wing more naturalistically. Because otherwise trying to convey, it's harder to convey an effect not doing it that way. Like trying to say, hey, there's stuff under here. It can be very difficult, even for me. As I will show you, I'm sure I will mess up some of the veins that we start to put in here. So here I am, I'm just blending on the last of my blue-gray here. I'm trying to fudge this in a little bit softer. And I'm just using, actually this is the same brush stroke that I use for my layering, by the way. It's just a straight up stroke. And I'm just pretty much feathering in the edges to make it look a little bit more blendy. There we go. Okay, I'll move the palette so you guys can actually see the wing. Sweet. And I'm going to need to do more blue-gray, but we can do that for the other wing. We might only get one wing done today. That would be sad, but I could do that. All right. Here we go. I'm going to touch up that black real quick here. Yeah. Just checking to make sure there are no other questions. If I miss somebody's question, please ask again. I am often bad about looking up at the monitor all the time because I'm trying to actually hit these little parts of the wings. So when I'm really into it and I have to work fast, I might miss a question. So if I missed your question, please repost. There we are. Just kind of touching up. And you can see the black is thinned, but it covers really well. And note that the black still has not dried. As I mentioned, it's still perfectly wet in the palette, even though it's not a wet palette. I guess I could repeat my rule about the types and shapes of brushes and the types of palettes you use, since I already brought up that different palettes work better for certain techniques than others. It also matters about brush size. When you're using thinner paint, you generally want to use a smaller, thinner brush because your thin paint you want to keep under control. And when you're using a big fat brush, it is harder to do that. You can do it, but it is more difficult. It's making it more difficult for yourself. Whereas when you're using thick paint, you want to use a big fat brush, like this number 2, or number 1, depending on line, you know, they can vary by size. But a big fat brush is great with thick paint because you want a lot of paint in your brush so that it stays wet. Because the thicker the paint is, if you try to put thick paint in a skinny brush, it's going to start to dry right away. Whereas a big fat brush, there's enough fluid there to keep it wet for longer. So that's why I think you see a lot of wet palette painters gravitate toward using larger brushes. They may not think about it, but in reality, it's because if they're using a bigger brush, they can get away with thicker paint. And they learn to work that way. And the thicker paint works with the wet palette because the paint is going to naturally thin itself just a little bit on a wet palette. And then, you know, so they tend to gravitate toward techniques that are more in line with those things. I tend to use skinny little brushes and very thin paint, so I use a well palette, and that's where I get my best success. Unless I'm speed painting something, or speed mixing or speed base coating something, and then I'll switch to the wet palette, but I generally don't like to. I'm very much a control freak. I like to have ultimate control over my paint consistency. A wet palette does not do that for me, so I tend to go with well palette, even when I'm using a little bit thicker paint. And it's all style. Try everything. Some people love their wet palettes, and that is awesome. But don't like count out something just because you hear a painter say it. You know, just because, well, you know, Sergio uses a wet palette, would never use a well palette. Well, you're not Sergio, so try both and see what you like. And it doesn't make you any, you know, it's not bad to be different on painting. Everybody does things differently. All right, you know what? Let's try some veins and see what we can do. I'm going to need a skinnier brush for this. Let me see, where's a skinny brush? Skinny brush, that's a skinny brush. Yeah, the lighting does make it like kind of flatten out there. Can you see it now? Tiger Mojo? That's a little bit, when I tilt it, you can see it a little bit better. But yeah, wet blending doesn't give you like really striking stuff, but it does let you set up a little bit of blend fast. It is also harder to wet blend when you're using white because it tends to be so strongly opaque that it doesn't want to like blend into a more translucent color like a blue very easily. But at least it gives me a suggestion of highlights toward the edges. See, there you can see, I think, and there. So yeah, it is a broad blend. What's today's goodie? Silverthorn. We have Drow Nipple Pink Silverthorn. 3 luscious bottles of Drow Nipple Pink if you haven't gotten yours. Yeah, all right. So let's do veins. I need a reddish color. A darkish reddish color. So let me see what I've got on my plate here, and we'll just mix it up as we go, folks. Because that's what I do. I mix paint. You know what? Let's try clear red with a little bit of our blue liner and see what color that makes. Whoop. Uh-oh. My clear red is very enthusiastic. It's like burble, 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 squirt. There we go. And that's a direct quote. All right. Black 2.0 or 3.0. Is that the black that's the blackest black, Norwegian Gadget Man? Like that specialty black that they claim is totally the blackest black. That only the one guy sells through Europe or something. Yeah, I have tried it actually then. And the reason that it appears to be the blackest black is that it is dead matte. That's the thing. It's actually the finish rather than the pigment that they are hitting. They're nailing perfectly. I worked with it. I compared it to our black. It is a more matte. But yes, the Pathfinder. Sorry, had to answer the other questions, Grim. Yeah, the Pathfinder paints are all new colors. But yeah, so Norwegian Gadget Man. It is. That's also why it's really hard to photo, because if you're trying to photo a dead matte color, especially black, there's no shine for the camera to focus on, and that's why it's photoing like it's a black hole. And is it useful? That depends. I think it's kind of a specialty color. Because usually with MSP, we like to put a little bit. We don't do a dead matte, right? We do a matte finish, but we don't do a dead matte. And that's because dead matte changes the color. The finish will absolutely affect the color of a paint. So it's like, I'm not sure what I would use it on, but I'm sure you could get some cool special effects with the black 2.0 or 3.0. It's just coming up with, well, what would I use it for? So, but yeah, I did mess around with it. One of my painter friends got a bottle and tossed it at me and said, "Tell me why this is what it is." And I said, "Okay." Do my stupid paint tricks. All right, so I've got a dark red. I've mixed just a tiny bit of blue liner, which is black and blue pigment, with my clear red, which is just red all the time. And I've gotten a nice kind of dark bluish red, which would be good for veins. Veins, the best way to think about them is like rivers, unpredictable rivers. The thing with veins is you do not want them to be too regular. Hey, sibling, good to see you. So I'm just going to actually just play around. I actually do have, I saved, whenever you're trying to do natural stuff, it helps if you have photos. So I'm actually going to look at my phone for 2 seconds because I know I have pictures of veins, something with veins. I just have to see if I can find them. And what I noticed about the veins is that there were actually very few going across the broad surface of the membrane. Most of them were gathered toward the corners. I really believe strongly if you're going to paint something naturalistic, try to find a naturalistic reference. It's going to just make it look that much more real. Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, all right. So I can't really, well, maybe I can show you. I don't know how this is going to translate, but I'm going to show you this. This is a frog's foot. There we go. Perfect. Yay! Your camera's awesome, Justin. So right away, we notice a few things. The veins start at the edge. They travel mostly perpendicularly across the wing. They almost vanish as they get toward the middle. They are mostly gathered together at the edges. You don't get very much toward the middle here, just more there, here, here. You get a lot of parallel, and a lot of blood flow and flush near this, the center, which is the toe, the actual bones. So what that tells me is that we're mostly going to show our veins closer to the ribs of the wings, and that they're going to be a lot thicker near the bones, and that they're going to kind of trail off a lot as they get toward the center. And other than that, you can see that the veins are very kind of random. They come in at kind of diagonals or to each other and make really rough groupings, just like little rivers or marble. So you don't have to be predictable with them. But we're gonna use this as a reference, and we're gonna go for it and see how we would apply that. So let's see here. I'm gonna see. This is pretty thin. I don't want to start too thick because I want this to be kind of transparent, but my color is also pretty darn strong because clear red has a lot of pigment in it. Yeah, Greek Nakos, I can see that. Yes, exactly. Once you apply a coating, or any kind of sealer, the dead matte effect will be lost, right? Because you're overlying it. And matte is the hardest finish to keep over successive layers. And the reason for that, I can talk about chemistry for you guys. All right, so the reason that matte is difficult to keep is that the thing that makes matte is a bumpy finish. It's disrupting the way that light falls, and that's what gives you a dead matte effect, right? So it's like little tiny microscopic bumps. The more coats of something, even more bumps, if you apply more coats of like a dead matte sealer, Tester's Dull Coat is a great example. The more coatings you apply of this, the more those bumps actually fill each other in. So if you put enough layers of dull coat on a model, it'll start to look satin because you've filled in all your texture with more texture. So that's why, yes, dead matte is the hardest finish to keep over successive layers of painting. So, yeah, it's a mild satin. Yeah, I'd call us eggshell. Like, we're a matte, but we still have a little bit of life. We don't quite, I work with satin paints, Cajun Mage, and we're not quite a true satin, but you're right, we're real mild. We just want to keep a little life because we really want that color. So let's play with some veins here. Let's see here. Oh, that's actually about perfect. So, and I'm just going to kind of let my brush wander across the surface, right? And I don't really care, like, if they match up or if they don't. I'm going all the way across the surface. I'm going to start here. I'm going to let that one trail out. So I'm working really thin. I should show you guys my paint consistency real quick. Here we go. This, see how watery that is? Look, it's like a wash, right? I'm painting with wash. So I'm using an extremely thin brush because I don't need a very thick brush because this has so much water in it, it's going to stay wet in this little thin brush forever. So that's why I'm using a really thin brush. That, and I can get these really fine lines. And the paint is just strong enough that those fine lines are going to show up. And if I want them to show up stronger, all I have to do is paint over them again. So here, time to put on the glasses for once. Granny glasses coming online. So, okay, let's see here. So if I want this one a little thicker, I just have to paint a little bit more. I actually had a little bit too much paint on my brush to start with. I had a little puddling. So I'm going to paint a little bit more. And the reason you do this, honestly, you might be tempted to start with more paint on your brush or to make them a little thicker straight out of the gate. But this is a mistake because if you go too strong out the gate, you're going to have a lot of work to get back, to walk it back, right? You might have to paint over it and just start over. Whereas if you start with tracing the veins really light, then you can always put another little layer where you want to darken it. That's no problem. And it's a lot less work than trying to cover up something where you went too strong. So see, that's where we are at. We're going to do more. Let's see here. Got to get most of the paint off my brush. If you're using paint this thin, really take the paint off your brush until you can draw, like use your fingernail or use a styrofoam plate or use part of your palette. But you want to be able to draw really thin lines like that. You don't want to be able to see any puddling or pooling on there because that means you don't have control of your paint, and you want control of your paint. If you're using a brush that's this precise, control is everything. When you're doing tiny little vein lines, control is all about it. So it doesn't really matter even if I start painting out here. I'm going to do a couple of little connected ones. Going to do one that kind of goes along that way. And I'm just going to kind of darken them in toward the edges, just like we saw on that frog foot. And we don't have to be real precise about this because we can come in with our blue-gray mix and kind of touch it up if we screw it up. So, I mean, don't sweat it too much. Where the lines may have ended up thicker, just make it connect to another vein. It doesn't matter also, I mean, if you end up with a thicker one toward the center, it's not a big deal. Just make sure most of your lines are thicker toward the edges. Remember, that's really how it looked. And I might just leave that kind of fading off, suggesting that these actually connect in the middle. There we go. I'll do a few more. So you see, if I just start like really mapping them in fast, that we can actually progress very quickly. So I don't want to overdo it either. I'm leaving like some areas that are very free of veining and other areas that are closer, getting more detail. Paint them in a little bit more. There we go. Then I'm going to paint this in a little bit more. Maybe make a squiggle up there. Veins get very, very thin. So, all right, so we've got kind of a suggestion of veining there on that wing. And that's actually looking pretty good. Like, I will put a glaze over it. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to really tell the difference after, but maybe. Maybe I'll put a glaze on one side and not on the other. That would actually show us, I think, a little bit better. I'm going to just make some of these a little bit stronger toward the edges. And I might also take some of my red, thin it down to the level of a real glaze, and glaze it along the edge of the wing. Because remember that frog membrane, he had definite a reddish tone here right near the bone. So I would thin my paint even more for that because I don't want lines at that point. I just want color. And I would kind of block in a little bit of rosy color, just a little bit, toward the edge of that wing if we're going for realism. And I always like to go for realism. You can always fancy it up afterwards and make it look not quite so realistic. But I think even on fantasy creatures that addressing surfaces in a realistic manner is very important to make it more convincing. I think it can really add a level to like dragons and critters in general that aren't real to treat them like they're real when it comes to textures and things like this. I'm just gonna block in more of this reddish pinky tone toward the edges here. I'm not gonna be real precise about it. You can be kind of messy on this one. You guys like it when I say that, don't you? It can be messy. Oop, oop, was that a sub noise? Was that a sub noise? Huh. A follow, yay, somebody's following us. Yes, remember to follow us. Then it will tell you when we are live. Even though I am mostly predictable on this topic, I am often live at the same time every week. We try to keep to that. But just in case we decide to do some super secret, you know, awesome surprise show, then you will be notified when we go live. Yay, happy noises. Also, I love the happy noises. Yay, happy noises. All right, so we got that going on. Oh, my blue gray has completely dried because I used it all. But I do see something I want to kind of correct, so I'll just have to mix up some more of that. All right, so what we have here, and you can see that I didn't blend that very well. You can see I've got a little bit of a demarcation line there. That's okay. I'm going to glaze over the top and see if that fixes it, because that's one of the things that glazing can fix. We're doing glazing for a very specific purpose here. We're going to try to glaze so that we can make it look like these veins are under the skin instead of on top of them. Because if I look at them right now, it's very obvious that I painted them over the top of the wing. When you put a layer of paint between the veins in your eye, though, you can create an illusion that the veins are underneath the skin. And this is also how you do tattoos. So, oh, like an Ed sculpting hour? Are you really sure you want that? Be careful what you ask for, Greek geckos. But yeah, so you do the same thing for tattoos and anything like that where you want to create an effect of something under skin. You put a glaze of skin tone over it. Now for this, I could use the blue, or I could try to use a more fleshy color and see how that works. Because we kind of were playing with that on our dragon, using glazes of different colors over the top of other colors to get an interesting effect. So let's try that. I've got a skin tone color. One of my favorites is Bright Skin Shadow. That's 9232. It's very rosy, as you can see. But I'm going to try it and see how it works. And if I don't like it, I'm only going to tint the surface with it, so I can always do another layer of the blue-gray. I probably won't lose those veins with just 2 glazes. Glazes are thinner than washes. Because they're thinner than washes, you are actually breaking the paint. You can add a certain amount of water to the paint that will cause the bonds between the resins to break apart. And that is why if you thin a wash too much with water, you'll see it dry like in rings, right? It'll create that terrible ringed effect that nobody likes. That's because you've broken it, essentially. There's a point where the paint cannot hold itself together with too much water added. So we do that when we glaze, and the reason that we don't see problems is that when we apply a glaze, we don't let anything pool. So with a wash, you want stuff to pool and darken the cracks, right? With a glaze, all you want is one thin layer, and if you see extra puddling or pooling, you take your brush and you wick that off, because that's going to dry in rings. It's going to be a problem for you. So when you are glazing, use as big a brush as you can get away with, cover the surface as fast as you possibly can, and then let it sit. Do not touch it. If you have to wick away excess fluid, wick it away fast, and then just back off. Because if you try to go in and futz with it after it starts to dry, you will create holes, and it is bad. Maleficent flesh look. Does she have the translucent veiny thing going on, Cajun Mage? Yeah. Yeah, you do the veins, and then you do probably a glaze with white or a really pale skin tone, depending. I don't have a picture of her in front of me, although I thought Angelina Jolie was an excellent pick for that. But then I'm an Angelina Jolie fan. Now, if you want, you can use a glazing medium or like something like Reaper Brush on Sealer added to your glaze to hold it together a little bit better. I think I might do that this time, just to give it a try. Usually I just like to use water, but let's try to actually add a little body. What adding a glaze medium or a brush on sealer or a matte medium, anything like that to your paint, what you're doing is you are holding those resins together. You're saying, I want this to be transparent, but I don't want to break my paint. So I'm going to use, in place of water, I'm going to use a little bit of a medium. Reaper Brush on Sealer doubles as a handy matte medium for this sort of thing. So it's quite useful that way. I'm going to, let's see, I said I was going to start paying attention to my ratios for this sort of stuff, so I'm going to do that today. So right now, I've got 2 drops of sealer, 2 drops of water, and 2 drops of paint. I'm going to mix that up and see what it looks like. See if that's close. So it's essentially a 1 to 2 thinner to paint. That consistency, I'm showing you guys my palette a lot this time, but that's okay. Hopefully it's not boring. There we are. All right, so ta-da. All right. Wow, this is colored water. So yeah. So it's a good thing that I maybe put a little bit of that medium in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this on an area that I don't care so much about, which is over here. I'm going to put a quick kind of glaze over the top of this, and I'm going to, anywhere it pools, we want to wick it off a little bit, so I'm taking that off the edge. And I'm going to let it dry, and I'm going to see how much it colors that surface and see if that's what I'm looking for. And this is absolutely something like, use like the foot of a model or use the edge of a cloak where you can easily touch it up or paint it somewhere out of the way that you can adjust it easily, that you haven't done too much work on it. And that'll give you an idea if that's the effect you're really looking for. I wanted this to look a little bit more like skin, so that's why I'm using a skin tone to kind of glaze it. I'm actually I kind of like it. The other thing that this does, by the way, oh yeah, definitely try it. Oh yeah, the rulers of hell with those wings. Yeah, definitely add veins. Maleficent, lifeless colored flesh, gray or green or bluish gray. Yeah, so like this. So there we go. So the other thing that this does, guys, is we're using a complementary color over the top of its complement. So like this is blue, and my skin tone, though it has a fair amount of pink in it, is pretty orangey. So what this does is it creates kind of a muted effect, kind of a grayed out effect without actually using gray. And I'm thinking I kind of like that. I think I might try it and see what it ends up kind of looking like. It's a little bit strong. The other rule with glazing, though, is when in doubt, make it weaker rather than stronger, because you can do it a second coat, but you cannot take that coat off if it's too strong. So I may add just a tiny bit more water. 1 more drop. Bloop. There we go. All right, so now we're at 3 drops water, 2 drops sealer, 2 drops paint. I said I was going to track this stuff more often because a lot of people ask me, and it's like, well, every color is different, but you could probably get ballparks put together based on how bright the color is. So yeah, if I put this over the top of the palette, you can see that it's like almost not there, right? You can see a tiny smudge where I put it there. And I'm going to paint that. Yeah, that's a lot lighter. I'm going to go with that. Okay, let's try it on one side of our wing and leave that side normal. And we're going to assess if we like it. And you know, if we don't, we can always paint over it. Yes, it's a lot of, you know what, let's see. Wow, it's already almost an hour. But still, it's less than an hour that we've invested at this point. So if we have to repaint something, it's not the end of the world. So right away, we want to start at the top. I may have to do the whole wing, guys. If I don't do the whole wing, then I'm going to get a horrible line here, which means that if I really like this, I'm going to be super sad. We're just going to go over it. All right, so fill up your brush with fluid. It is very fat and full of fluid. See, it is not coming to a natural point. It is full of glaze. Slobber it all over the place. Try to pull it down toward the edge, though, so it's easy for you to pull excess off. Kind of let gravity do your work, too. So start here, go down, okay? All right, bloop, 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 and just brush it over the surface. Brush, brush, brush. Don't panic just because you see a bright color. Rinse out brush. Do it as fast as you can because you don't want it to dry. And where you see it pooling, use the edges and tips of your brush to pull it off of there. Do it fast. You want to get the upper areas quicker than you do the lower, because up here it's stretched very thin. But down here where it's pooling, it's going to stay wet longer, so you have more time to catch the ones down here. And I'm just going to grab these little bits, putting a glaze over our thing. I see a little bit here. Let's see, it's still wet, so I can still grab it. That warmed it up a lot too. All right, so totally shifted the color, see? Even though that was really colored water down here, that you can see the difference in color. And you can also see that it's a little bit more visually complex. All right. Yeah, Rulers of Hell is a fantastic expansion. They're just great models. I agree with you guys. Yeah, so this is a lot more complex of a look, right? It's no longer just flat blue-gray. It actually is more interesting now. And in person, you guys could see this a little bit more, but it really does have a fleshy look now. It's a lot more. I wish this showed better on camera. Dang. Because it actually, to my eyes, there's like a striking difference between this panel and these guys. But it's not really showing too much on the camera. But you guys see that there's a difference at least. So yeah, never be afraid to go with a complementary color for your glaze. I may need to do another layer because I'm noticing the veins didn't get taken down. Now, so this is a thing. And if you want your veins to really disappear faster, you want to use a color with more white in it, right? Because white covers better. So essentially, putting a layer of really light skin tone on this would give me more of a cover-up faster on these veins. And it'll make the whole thing look a little bit more transparent faster. But the problem is that glazing with a light color is really difficult. And the reason is that the white is so opaque that you have to get pretty much a flawless coat on there and then just hands off, leave it alone. Glazing with light colors, not for the faint of heart. Darker colors, they're transparent. You can get away with a little bit more, but white shows brush strokes. So that said, I'm thinking I really like what this is doing right now, but I could use a little bit. Yeah, I kind of want more white. Maybe even, All right, I'm going to try this. And if we wreck it, we wreck it. Sometimes you just got to live dangerously. Because I like it so far. But the other thing that a more opaque glaze does is it covers up your brush strokes a little bit faster. So it is living dangerously, but... So let's see what our ratio is here, right? We were working with that skin tone, and that skin tone had a fair bit of white in it, but it wasn't pure white. It wasn't dragon white. So how much water and sealer are we going to have to add to get this sucker as transparent as this last one? I'm betting at least... I'm going to say it was 2 drops of sealer and 3 drops of water here. I'm saying at least 3 to 4 drops of sealer and 3 to 4 drops of water. Probably 4 drops of water. That's what I'm guessing. Because white is just, it's the most powerful color. The more a color wants to cover, the harder it is to get it to go transparent. That's why skin tones can be so hard for people. Because they almost all are loaded with white, unless you're doing dark skin. And that means that it's a lot harder to get them to the point where they blend smoothly. Bright shadow, Cajun Mage. 9232. I really like bright skin shadow. I just love how saturated it is, and it can really warm things up really nice, especially a cool color. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to gamble 4. So that's, instead of 2 drops sealer and 3 drops water, we're going with 3 drops sealer and 4 drops water for our white. And then I'm going to mix it up and see how it goes. This might still be too much. Because white wants to cover. Boy, it does. And I should put it over here to show you guys how much it wants to cover. Let me rinse out my brush. You notice how much I rinse my brushes. I rinse them compulsively. I have the paint numbers memorized, therefore I know how many drops to add. It's not quite that way, Grim, but I have been painting an awful long time. Not since dinosaurs long time, but you know, long time. All right, so I'm going to get some of this on here. I'm going to paint it again. Remember how we tested it? I'm going to paint it over this surface. Actually, that's not a bad... It definitely does. Can I see how? Yeah, there you go. You guys can see it now, right? See how there's that glaze area. You can definitely see that it made a difference, but not terrifically. This camera, yeah, it is not showing my differentiations that much, but it definitely made an impact. So I think I can go with that. I don't think I need it thinner. I think if I'm careful, I can do it. I may use my flat for this, though, because that's how fast I want to cover this surface. So remember, when you're glazing a big surface, use as big a brush as you can get away with while still keeping things within the line, if that's what you're trying to do. Yeah, Black Sting's an awesome, awesome model, and I really want to paint him at some point. But first, we must get through our Dance of Death, because our dragons would cry if I didn't finish them. All right, So, big gigantic brush because I can cover this surface really fast. And again, this is why we didn't paint the ribs already, because this way I can be messy and I don't have to worry about it. So, load up brush. Oof, that's a lot of paint on this brush. This brush picks up so much. Kind of test it. All right. Here we go, guys. All right, here we go. Woof. Brush over the whole dang thing. Thin it out super fast. Dry it off super fast so it's just damp. Go up. I'm going to grab my secondary brush at this point to wick off. And I put a thin enough layer on that. There we go. Now look at how much that covered up our veins. Like holy bejeebus, right guys? And look at it also lightened up that wing. I still have the pink under it though. Can you see? Like you still get that complexity of that bright skin shadow layer. So it's definitely more interesting, and it's really fading out those veins. Now those veins really look like they're under a layer of skin because they've been covered up with a couple layers of paint, and that gives us our illusion. And if we really wanted to, we could maybe take a little bit more intense red and hit those a little bit just to bring out the reddish tone a little bit, blushy color maybe. Maybe I'll do that. So, but you guys can see it, right? Like it really has faded in. And that's because white is just so opaque. When you do this sort of thing, you're kind of holding your breath hoping it works. But at the same time, this gives you that effect. So using pale skin tones over tattoos, same sort of thing. It'll do a lot in one coat. Just be careful. Yeah, like you can't see all the capillaries, but they're there. And if you were here in person, you could get close and see the capillaries. Yeah, see, they're there. Sometimes if you tilt it at a different angle, you don't see them all. Yeah, so all right. Excellent, excellent. Yes, so I'm going to add a little more pink, I think. I'm going to grab my clear red, and I'm going to mix it with just a little bit of my previous clear red plus blue liner dark red, which actually, if you notice, looks a lot like 9002 deep red, so you can't tell that I'm just hand mixing a certain color. Technically, deep red has a little bit of violet in it as well, but I'm really liking this wing. I think it's pretty cool. All right, let's see here. So some clear red, brightest red in the universe. Eye screaming bright red. And I think I want to kind of mix it with a little bit of my bright skin, but I just want a tiny bit. There we go. And I want it really, really thin, like that. Oop, somebody had a happy noise. Did somebody follow us? Hosted us. Thanks, man, Amanda. Wow, hosting is awesome. We like that. Somebody thinks we're cool enough to have on their channel. All right, so I'm going to use this, go back to small brush, tiny brush, because remember, really thin paint, if we want to control where it goes, we use a thin brush and we get very little of that on it. And I'm going to concentrate on kind of rosying up probably the edges here. I'm going to see how this works. Again, I'm just kind of going on instinct at this point. I just want it a little bit more warm. So I'm using my layer in brush stroke, and since I'm painting with essentially a glaze, it's going to be real subtle anyway. But I want to bring in that rosy color a little bit more. I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up real well because I'm going really subtle here. And I'm just going to essentially do a number of layers. This is essentially target glazing. Like I am only like, I'm layering with the glaze. So I'm not going to get the effect that I get with layering. Like with layering, I can always see my layers every time I put a layer down. But by doing this, I'm quickly building up multiple layers of glaze exactly where I want them. And I know roughly where I want them, so I can still see them in person. Pink up that edge. Yeah, there you go. So you can see that I'm pinking it up, right? You can see where it's a little bit warmer. You can actually see it a little better in person. Again, the camera can't do everything. Let me actually go back and get this palette out of frame, because sometimes the camera will do a little better if the background is not white. Yeah, okay. A little bit. You can see a little bit more rosy there. It's quite rosy in person. So let's see here. I'm going to go on the other side and do the same thing. Since I'm essentially spot glazing, I can also use this to try to smooth out any irregularities that I have left over. And spot glazing is kind of interesting just because, you know, it's so very thin and you don't really see it very much, but you also don't need it as precise of a consistency as you do for layering. Like layering, you're looking for that perfect brush stroke that starts out transparent and then ends opaque, where it puts down, where you lift your brush, it puts down a heavier load of color. Whereas with this, I'm really just going over the surface super fast with super thin paint to just build up a suggestion of color. I don't have to be too precise with it. I'm just looking for kind of a subtle blush around the edges of the wing membrane. And probably, maybe I'm going a little bit, you know, too in-depth on a dragon wing. I said I would speed paint. That's probable. I'm open to that criticism. This is the problem with Anne. It's never speed painting, guys. I set out to speed paint, and I have all the best intentions to speed paint. And then I end up doing something like this and going, oh, but this is fun. Let's spend more time on it.
Thank you for the host.
Another host. Yay, hosting. More hosting. Many hostings. All right. And, oh, yeah, hi, Alan. Alan Wee. Alan W-Y? I don't know. Something. Alan. We're just going to call you Alan, unless you want me to call you something else. But yes. So, oh, and free stuff. Yeah, hashtag free if you want to be entered to get one of these bottles of Drow Nipple Pink, which is a legendary Reaper color that it only comes out like once every 3 or 4 years at ReaperCon. And there's always a limited supply, and you have to ask me about drow nipples. So to save yourself embarrassment, you can just type hashtag free now and save yourself that. And be entered into our drawing to win one of those bottles of awesome Drow Nipple Pink, which is a fantastic skin shader, by the way. It's also just a pretty color in general. I would use it to paint gowns on vampires. I just thought that it would be a great vampire gown color. All right, so pretty. Yeah, yeah. Like, I'm still maybe a little heavy over here. I like this side of the wing better. It's coming off more like I wanted it. But that's fine. I can tune that. I can still tune that. So overall, I'm not too bad with this. I'm going to remix my blue and gray, or my blue liner and white real quick, and try to glaze a little bit of this. I got a little bit strong still with that the red that I was putting in at first. So I'm going to try to correct that, because you guys like when I screw up and I fix it. Anyone here is easily embarrassed. Yeah, Silverthorn, you have a point. Where's my blue liner, blue liner, blue liner? Aha, blue liner and white. We'll mix up a new bottle of blue-gray. Ta-da! And meanwhile, I will try to prop up my wings so that anybody tuning in can see that we are doing wing today. Wing. Ah, wing does not want to prop. There we go. There we go. Wing. Yaha! While I mix up a color. So yes, there you go. You can all see the veins. You can actually, in this particular pose, you can see how rosy it's gotten on this side and how it's pinker toward the edges. More realistic, more interesting. We like visual interest. We do not like bland, blasé things. We want spicy. Spicy wing. Embarrassment is inevitable for me. So, yes, Pezler Polychromatic, you are welcome in this venue. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, let's start with that. See what I can do. Mixing up my happy blue-gray again. Doo-doo. Needs a little more white. But again, this is one of those great times where it's like, because you're only mixing 2 colors, it's easy to match your previous thing. You can see instantly that, oh, I just need 1 more drop of white. I'm good. Let's see here. You know, we don't need a lot of bare-chested Drizzt cosplay at ReaperCon. I mean, I'm just thinking about if like half of ReaperCon showed up dressed as that, I would be like, what reality have I gone into? And how can I escape it? They're all off screen. All right, so I've got my blue-gray mixed up again, but I don't have it thinned to the level I need, so I do need to do that. Grab, throw more water at it. Throw water at it until it looks good. Or at least thin enough. There we go. So the other reason I like using this little palette with all the tiny wells and porcelain is that I can tell what my paint consistency is by watching how the paint falls off the side of the palette. You guys may have noticed me referencing that earlier when I brought it out and I was like, see how thin this is? And I pulled the paint up the side of the palette and let it fall. Thus, it is a great way to, oh, who came up? Grim, do you want me to tell the story? Yes. Yes, as Tazalange has said, this was Ed trying to be funny. He does that on occasion. He walked into my department and he went up to the urgent colors board and he wrote "Drow Nipple Pink" in all caps at the top. He thought this was hilarious and I said, fine, I'll make it. So I did. I made it for ReaperCon that year. I only made 100 bottles, and in order to get it, you had to come up and ask me about drow nipples. It was kind of a secret, not secret. So this year I am more prepared. I do have more drow nipple pink made, which is why we have extra bottles to give away. So if you're not going to make it to ReaperCon and you want a bottle of the legendary drow nipple pink, because I don't know when next I'm going to make it, so now is the time to get some. Yes, yes, of course Ed is the person who came up with drow nipple pink. All right, I'm gonna do layering to try to fix this and blend it in a little bit better. This looks, yeah, there, now you can see. See, I've got that line there, and I don't like that line, that red line. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use layering. I'm gonna come at it from the opposite direction. Instead of building up more paint into that, I'm gonna take this blue-gray and do layering over that edge to try to bring it down. And it shouldn't take too much. Pretty much all I'm doing is I'm putting tiny lines down of blue-gray to disrupt that edge. And it's a very easy correction. And my blue-gray is extremely thin. It's layering thin. But see, that's already starting. It's already starting to take down this edge. This one is the real one I really am annoyed at. And better yet, since it's very thin, it's not really disrupting the effect of the glazes either. Just doing little strokes right across that line at a perpendicular to the line that I want to remove. And that will slowly, see, you can see that blending in, that will slowly blend in the line that I do not like. And it won't take too long. I mean, I'm not going to spend a couple of minutes on this and it'll probably be fine. I'm just taking a look. Have to look at it from a couple of different angles. The other thing is there's a crease in the wing right here, and I think that was half the problem. The paint just pooled just a little bit right there. And so we're going to do our little layering brush stroke. And we're going to do a couple of runs of it and just try to minimize that a little bit. It's not actually as bad as I thought it was. There you go. See how that's faded in? You don't see that really strong line anymore. Not like you see it down here. See, the line is still down here. But the line is more or less disappeared up here. The power of layering, folks. Easy blending, even easy fixing. Oh yeah, it would be cool if you could make it to ReaperCon sometime, Grim. Yeah. Now Orc Nipple Pink would be a totally different color. Evil Elvis, hi. Never challenge Anne. Ishtar Dozy, just saying that at the beginning of the series has been very helpful. Thank you so much for both. Yay! Ishtar, it's wonderful to hear that from you. I'm glad that it's been helpful. I assume you were in a time zone which is only now waking up. So Japan? Something like that? Orc nipple, I don't know. I would try to do something wonky and make it greenish pink. Like, you got to be able to do it somehow. I don't know. Orc nipple, gosh. It'd be really muted, grayed out pink, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that'll be our next one. Orc nipple something or other. I don't know. I mean, it would vary by the orc, too. Not all orcs would be the same. Everybody's different. But yeah, maybe we need more nipple colors. Ed would love that, by the way. If Ed is watching this right now, he is like jumping up in the air with his fists held in victory signs, going, yes, more nipple colors. Orc nipple brown. Orc nipple khaki. Yeah, there we go. Australia. Oh, 5:30 a.m. Well, thanks for tuning in from Aussie land. That's pretty awesome that you're down there. Nipple colors for all races. Let's not go there. Otherwise, Ed's going to want the nipple box set with 8 nipple colors or something. And then, I don't know, some little part of me is going to think it's hilarious and the other rest of me is just going to die a little. I've been trying, okay guys, I've been trying for ages to get Ed to be more politically correct just because he's like the CEO of like the biggest miniatures company in America. And it just, no, it just doesn't work. You just got to give in, embrace the crazy, just be done. Oh, in Adelaide. Yay, more Australians. Hey, at least we're watchable for you guys. Like if we were a little later, it would be better for you, but I'm just going to continue layering to try to minimize this red line. Although some of it is veins, so I have to kind of be careful on what I'm doing. I can also use this opportunity to blend in some of my, oop, that was a happy noise. What's our happy noise, Justin?
That's a follow.
It's a follow. Somebody followed us. Thanks, guys. And just because we're cool, we won't assume that you're following us because you're stalking us. We'll assume that you're following us because you like us. All right. So yeah, and this is another time. Yes, he's not the kind of crazy that gets people in the bad trouble. Everybody loves Ed. Yeah, see, that's the problem. You start out going, Ed, and then you're like, Ed, and then you're like, Ed, and then you're like, Ed. Yeah, that's pretty much it. He's irrepressible, and he is totally himself. You cannot dislike it. All right. Oh, in Canberra. Wow, we have a lot of Australians. Excellent. That's pretty cool, actually. Like here I thought we'd get more Europeans, but you guys are, like, more in the know than the Europeans are, apparently.
We have someone from Norway.
Oh, yay! Yay, Norwegian Gadget Man! Duh! I should have figured out that you were Norwegian, but people's tags are not necessarily literal sometimes on this, this Twitch thing. That's pretty cool. I've always wanted to visit Norway. Yeah, Grim. I know. And Scotland! Oh, I have been to Scotland, and I really loved it. A show of hands who'd buy a nipple color box set. Okay, maybe that's the next scary thing. Like, I don't have the time right now because we actually are working our butts off trying to get the Pathfinder line ready for release. It turns out we need more of it than we thought. So we're flipping in the paint department. We are currently flipping an entire line of paint in under a month, which is crazy, by the way. So it's lucky that they released me to come here. Chewy, MP. No, this is Dance of Death. Julie Guthrie's Dance of Death. This is Dragon. And these are his wings. And we're just playing around, kind of doing some wet blending and doing some vein effects. I promised people last week that I would show them how to do veins on wings. So if you missed the beginning and you want to see that, then definitely tune into this on Reaper Miniatures YouTube. You can always watch it after the fact. There's a thing in the makeup world, match your lipstick to your nipple color. Oh my gosh. You know, I have to agree that my recipe for doing natural lip color is actually the same as doing natural nipple color. So I have to say the makeup world may have something there. All right. So what I'm also able to do right now, guys, by the way, also is blend in places where my white highlighting got a little rough next to my bluer highlighting. So like you can see this demarcation line, right? That little kind of shadow next to the white. Well, I can take my color, and if I'm very smart, I'm going to put a little more white in it because I want to blend this in. I don't want to lose all this white. So I'm going to grab my white. I know you're not kidding. That's really, what do you mean by more for the Pathfinder? Casmania. So, essentially we had done a lot of Pathfinder paint, and we thought we had enough, and then we realized, oh no, we don't really have enough because we're doing a lot to have it ready for ReaperCon, and we are also going to release it right after ReaperCon, which we didn't necessarily know at the time. So, we're having to do even more batches, essentially. We're not adding colors to it, but we're adding even more batches to make sure that we have enough Pathfinder paint for everyone. But it was an unexpected last-minute sudden kind of thing. We thought we had enough, and then we didn't. So we are flipping 56 colors trying to do it in 3 weeks. It is a little bit crazy. On top of all the ReaperCon stress and, you know, Bones 5 looming and all the rest of it. So, and just the general Reaper crazy. More stock, Kaz. Yeah, no, I can't do 56 more colors in 3 weeks. Like, as far as, you know, new colors. R&D time actually is the longest part of, it's the slowest part of doing a new paint line. Because if you're trying to make your colors, you know, good colors that are different from all the other colors, that cover well, that have a good consistency for pumping and a good consistency for brushing, all that stuff, yeah, it takes time. No, it's not going to delay the giveaway sets at all. It's just essentially, Grim, what we need is more for the release, which is in September, right after ReaperCon. So essentially, I'm kind of trying to stop her the dam before it explodes. Because we just don't know how it's going to sell. So we want to make sure we've got enough. Evil Elvis, that's fantastic. And if we hadn't already put a number on it, you're right. That would be it. All right, so I am essentially just trying to blend in my my highlights here. Blend in my lines. Make them less liney. Let's see here. So just like I said, it's easier if you want to smooth out stuff and make it, have more control over it, it's easier to go in with your layering after the fact than it is to try to get a perfect blend with wet blending. I knew a guy who used to wet blend everything. He went a little crazy. Because, you know, trying to get a perfect wet blend on one thing is crazy enough, but trying to get it on a whole miniature is really, really crazy. All right, so that's blending in a lot better now. I still could do a little more work. So we'll just do a layering brush stroke. Little thin lines, that's how I layer. That's why I use little thin brushes and little thin paint. Thin brush, thin paint for best effects. Okay. Yes, the Pathfinder stuff will be for sale at ReaperCon. And that's our worry, Swillow, because if it sells a lot at ReaperCon, that's where we're worried we won't have enough for new release. So that's why we're doing the flip. Nomad Zeke. Oh. Like, I almost wish we could give them a gold star every time they excel at punning, but it would just make everything so much worse. But still, that was pushing it, man. Yeah, limited release at ReaperCon, correct. Puts Anne on pause. Aww. Should I freeze? Free coal black with a Christmas order. Is it much different to your normal black? It is actually. I believe the coal black has like blue and green in it. And maybe a tad of white just to make it lighter so those colors show up. Any color I do, Ishtar, I try to make a little different. I don't like giving you guys something twice in two different names. I think that just confuses the issue. And I also don't want anybody like buying a bottle of paint that they think is new and different, and then it turns out to be too close to something else they already own. So me personally, when I design new colors like that, you can be sure there's something different about them. And the best way to find out is to put it next to a pure black and see if you see a little bit of a color shift. We put out a lot of near blacks because people like, a lot of people like to use not just black when they shade stuff. They like it to be a little more interesting. So that's why we do so many colors that are close to black but have colors like the colors in them. Like Nightshade Purple is a famous one. 9022. You can't put Anne on pause. No, I keep talking no matter what, Tazlanch. You're right. They'll just have to catch up. It'll be like speed Anne to catch up. How many rocks do I need from Halloween to trade in for something? That's a great idea, Grim. You should ask Ed that. You should tell him we need a rock trade-in. For the really bad people who have gotten that many rocks, we should have them bring in their rocks to trade for something. That would actually be pretty awesome. Because we all know that Ed is the worst. So, you know, he should totally reward the bad people who get rocks. I am layering more to blend that in. But you see, let's see, there we go. I've got a little bit of a demarcation line here. And I think I am reducing my white a little bit. I think maybe my blue-gray got a little bit too blue. Yeah, you could also, what Norwegian Gadget Man says is thin your blacks slightly and brush them on a watercolor paper. You could also do, I actually like marker paper because you can get a pad of it for pretty cheap and it is water impenetrable and it is, I mean, it's going to wrinkle, but for testing colors, it's also really bright white, which watercolor paper tends not to be. So I find that using marker paper works really well for that. I need to lighten this a bit. Losing my, my brights here. Is there a purplish black color? Yes, Dark Knight Azareth. I just mentioned it. Actually, it would be 9022 Nightmare Black. It's a purple that's so dark it pretty much reads as black. Now you can see my little lines because I went with a little thicker white here. But that's going to bring up my whites a little bit. That's going to blend it a little bit nicer. Yeah, Nightmare Black is blue, correct. It's a very intense blue-black. I've wanted that color forever because actually when old Pro Paint came out, they came out with a blue-black Silverthorn. And that was one of the first colors I tried out of Pro Paint. Actually, that was the very week that Reaper offered me a job when I tried that because I was down for the Reaper Artist Conference. And I loved the fact that it was actually like, it looked black if you painted it on straight. Like if you don't thin Nightmare Black at all and you just paint it on, it'll look really close to black if you have no other black on the model. But the minute you added water to it, it bloomed into this brilliant blue and I just loved that. So that's kind of why Nightmare Black was born once I realized I could get that effect. So there we go, guys. Look, I'm layering up. I'm using a lighter color to layer up our wings now. My blending isn't perfect, but it's getting there. It's all just, you know, back and forth. And thank you, Max Powers. I'm glad that you like the veins. I think they turned out very well. I'm very pleased with them. I think it's pretty much time to wrap up and give Justin time to, like, you know, give giveaways and ask for any last questions.
Go ahead and submit your entries into the contest, or not contest, but the giveaway if you haven't already.
Oh, and while he does that, you know, I went this whole time without telling you guys I have a Patreon. But yeah, do your hashtag free if you want to be entered into the giveaway for Drow Nipple Pink. And then if you want to check out my Patreon, then, you know, feel free. I have one. I love it. I do a lot of more focused tutorials on it where I'm not just painting one thing from week to week, but that I'm actually like focusing on stuff. Planning to do a face highlighting one this month, but it's patreon.com/paintingbig because I tend to paint bigger stuff on there like busts where I can go to town with textures and awesome stuff. It's also easier just to get them on camera and show you guys stuff when we're working on a bigger surface. So yeah, there you go. There's my plug, and make sure you get your hashtag freeze in. And I'm pretty happy with how this wing has turned out. I hope you guys had fun.
Max Powers, I'm not sure what email you emailed, but if it was to Ron or Adrian, which they usually handle the ReaperCon stuff, they are incredibly busy.
Oh my gosh,
so
yeah.
They will get to it eventually. I'm sure it's there. Because don't we always take in volunteers for ReaperCon?
Yeah, we do. I don't know what our staff is like right now for that.
I don't know either, to be honest
I don't know.
with you.
I mean, you could always, if you're showing up, you could always go up and say, hey, do you need help?
You could try that. That's true.
But if you don't get an answer, I mean. But yeah, I'm not sure what our procedure is. We might have somebody handling volunteers, but I couldn't swear to that. I really don't know. I'm just touching up the close to the ribs here. So yeah, look guys, there's wing. It's happy wing with veins and everything. Happy. Well, welcome then. Welcome, Ishtar. You just need more color nerd PDFs. Yeah, I do those. I just did a color wheel last time with MSP paints, so it was fun. It was super fun. And Kaz, thank you. Thank you that my Patreon is awesome. Yes, Reaper color charts. I thought about even taking that and doing like a muted one with grays. We'll see. We need to add the miniature painting tag onto our Twitch.
We do usually. It's
okay.
I keep having issues with Twitch. It likes to strip away our tags for some reason.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, and I think that could be because of Reaper Live.
Yeah.
And
Well, thanks for the reminder anyway, Chewy, because then we can double check it. It's just always good to have a double check.
But You ready to do the giveaway, Miss Ann?
Yeah. Time to do the giveaway. Everybody hashtag freed, right? You all hashtag freed? All right. Rocket.
All right, here we go. You can start the drum roll, Ann, if you'd like to. That's
Wait.
perfect. Thank you. Yes.
Drum roll, please. Except my
Yes.
wing fell over. My wing was very unhappy with the drum roll.
All right, we have our 3 winners. We have Swill O.
Swallow.
We have Arcane Void
Arcane Void.
and Dragonite 35. I think that's how
Dragonite
that's
35.
spoken.
Awesome.
I'll go ahead and announce it in chat
See,
here.
Swallow, that you get your reward for being an Overwatch League fan. I did not set it up, but I'm glad you won. And I managed to not talk about Overwatch for this whole, stream. So, I get a little gold star myself.
And remember,
Congrats, winners.
you email your mailing address to me at reaperlive@reapermini.com. And what else are they going to need in there, Ann? They're going to need their address,
Yes, their address.
their Twitch handle.
Oh, yeah, yep. There we go. Yep. You want to send your info to Justin so he can effectively reward you. And thank you for the Mercy Wings Zombie Cat, Silverthorn.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I hope you guys had fun. Like, I had fun today. Time just went by. So thanks for being such an awesome audience. It was a lot of enjoyment, and I'm actually really happy with how the wing is turning out. So I think I'm going to paint the rest of the wings this way too. And if I don't have time, you guys get to, if I don't have time to do it off camera, then you guys get to watch me paint all the rest of the wings this way too. And maybe mess them up in even more ways. Let's see. Reaper's own Mama-san. I know. Yay! All right, guys. 5 leftover Drown Nipple Pink after ReaperCon. Can we order it by number? I don't know if we even want to put that sucker in the store for Rissian. I don't know. And I really doubt there's going to be leftovers because I think there's going to be a run on it. I mean, I went through that first 100 bottles. The first year it came out, I went through that first 100 bottles in 1.25 days. So I'm kind of thinking that my 350 bottles are going to run out by the end of the con. We'll see, though. All right.
Thanks,
Yay.
guys. And
Yep,
we appreciate
thanks,
you
guys.
stopping
This
by.
is Ann signing off. Thank you for tuning in to Reaper Toolbox Live, and we hope to see you next week.
Hold on before we sign off.
Before we sign off?
Should they show up tomorrow?
Oh, yeah. You should show up and watch those Ed and Ron guys tomorrow.
Yeah, they're
Well,
a
you
little
should.
they're a little stuffy, but they're fun.
They're a little stuffy, but you can, pester them about things like Kickstarter. They love that.
Absolutely. All right, guys.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks.